John, I understand regarding Julian Assange that you have met him.
Yes, I know Julian very well. He's a friend of mine, has been for some years.
When is the last time you met him face to face?
I saw him recently, and yeah, he is in I would think a better state than he was. He seems very resilient, but he still bears the burden of being of a persecution that has lasted now 12 years, 12 to 13 years, with imprisonment during that time in its various forms. He's now, of course, in a terrible place in Belmarsh prison, which is a maximum security prison with people who have done really terrible things in it, murderers and others. Julian, of course, is a completely innocent man who has committed no crime and has been charged in the United Kingdom with no crime. His crime, of course, is journalism. The most dangerous crime of all.
When you see him, what's his message to you and to the world? What is he saying to you?
Well, he doesn't give out a message to the world when you see him. He's rather more concerned with keeping body and soul together, making sure that day is a good day, keeping a balance in himself. You know, the assault on this man, on his sense of himself, on his basic physical health, on his mental health, has been something I've never known before. And so that means that, well, his message always, broader message always, is appreciation at the support he's got from people. And whenever I see him, I make sure that I tell him that that support is often expressed to me. People know that I know Julian and will often sometimes stop me in the street to tell me, to pass on their solidarity and good wishes. I think he's now assured that he has a popular support in many countries, certainly in this country, in Britain, in his own country, Australia, to a large degree in Europe and in the United States. It's such an appalling case of injustice, of total injustice, that people need very little tutoring to understand it.
When you have seen him, is he still, how to say, in fighting spirit regarding his cause of journalism and whistleblowing and getting facts that people are trying to suppress out there? Is that still in him, or has he kind of other focus at the moment?
Well, as much as he can. He doesn't run WikiLeaks now. That's in the hands of a comrade who's in charge of WikiLeaks. But yes, his own getting his freedom, which is about him, of course, but it's about so many other things. It's also a principle that if Julian isn't freed, many of us who have spoken out can then be at risk. He is aware of that and has a sense of that. And when I last saw him, it was good to see his confidence having been restored, not entirely, but having been restored somewhat. And the reason he is in prison, because his message to people is that he represents free journalism. We have had for too long in our so-called democracies the kind of journalism, the kind of media noise that represents the voice of the state in all its forms, or the voice of a prevailing wisdom, of a consensual view. It's not the truth. And when something comes along like a war or some national crisis, something like that, the distortion is really quite grotesque. WikiLeaks cut through that. It undermined it. It gave people raw, authentic journalism. That's his threat. I mean, you know, to unaccountable power groups, it's been my experience in many countries, their threat is not an external enemy, very rarely, sometimes. It's from their own people, that their own people might find out what they're really doing, what they're really saying to each other, what they're really deciding. And that's what WikiLeaks revealed. And that's why Julian is considered a threat.
There's one question then, that came to my mind, a big one. If Julian Assange is extradited and convicted to prison for, I think, is it 175 years? Is that it?
Well, that's what it could be, yes.
I will get back to this, but I have a black hood in my mind that I will come back to you with. But as you see it, what is the significance for journalism globally and nationally if Julian Assange is extradited and convicted? What will be the significance for journalists?
It depends on what kind of journalism you're referring to. If you're referring to picking up the main Norwegian newspapers, I don't think it'll make any difference, because my experience of them is they turn out the same state-sponsored message anyway. But to real journalism, to what I would call, those I call the honorable exceptions, those journalists who care passionately about not serving a great organization, a Murdoch or somebody like that, or keeping simply a job, or going through the routine day after day, but who care about what journalism really is, and that is informing people of often unpalatable truths, inconvenient truths. There aren't many of those journalists. They exist, and they're outstanding. I think it then poses a threat to them all over the world, wherever they are, because here we have this extrajudicial power assumed by the United States, whereby it is allowed, it seems, to take somebody of Australian nationality working in Great Britain to an American prison. You know, if one of our official enemies, like China or Russia, had done that, there'd be outcry from those very same conservative Norwegian newspapers. But there's no outcry from most of the conservative press, most of the compliant press. Because Julian is actually saying things that so much of our journalism, so much of our media does not say. it does not report on. It gives us a one-sided view. So the short answer to your question, it will mean a dire threat to those journalists who do their job.
I want to share with you this nightmare that I had. This can be a stupid nightmare just to laugh off, but I will share it with you because you've been around as a correspondent and journalist since the Vietnam War. And after, Julian Assange was imprisoned and this extradition came about, I sat down and I thought about all the investigative journalists I have met throughout the years on seminars, journalists who, for instance, revealed clandestine operations in Afghanistan, American missiles hitting weddings in Yemen, the home country of my wife, and they have exposed such things. And in my nightmare, I kid you not, I woke up thinking, imagining a black hood being forced upon some journalist head after exposing something that's somebody don't want exposed, and then that journalist waking up in an American prison. Is that just a silly nightmare? Should I laugh of myself, or is this, might we have that?
Descriptive and very apt a dream, and hardly a dream. It won't be a dream to Julian, because that's what will happen. If he is extradited, he'll be picked up from his cell here in the middle of the night. They usually fly them in the middle of the night. He will probably, whether or not he'll be hooded, I don't know. But that certainly has been the form often in the past, but I don't know.
You have been around for such a long time as a journalist, and you have seen the development of journalism and power and counterpower through journalism. Is journalism on the losing front now, if this development keeps going?
Is journalists, just repeat that.
Is journalism kind of losing its position and standing if this development keeps going further?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I doubt it, because Julian has not had the support from what I would call the establishment media, and that is the majority of the media. No, he hasn't. Lately, yes, there have been some lukewarm editorials in newspapers, but going back over the years, he's had quite a lot of hostility from the media. Anybody who breaks ranks, journalism history is full of stories of these great mavericks who break ranks. You take the case of Wilfred Burchard, the Australian reporter who broke ranks to get to Hiroshima, the first reporter to get to Hiroshima in 1945, September 1945. I have his front page report on my wall as the par exemplar of great journalism. Other journalists turned against him for leaving the press pack, for not doing as he was told. And what they all had been told, this was during the Allied occupation of Japan, was that they would be going that day to a great ceremony on a ship and so on. But Wilfred said, no, the real story is what happened at Hiroshima. At that point, people didn't really know anything about the radioactive element of the atomic bombs that had been dropped. And he got that story. It was the most extraordinary scoop. But that was, and he did that right throughout his career, Burchard. There are other people, but he incurred the hostility of his so-called colleagues. That's what's happened to Julian on a huge scale.
Mm.
And those colleagues should be examining their own conscience now. They've had plenty of time to think about this. Some of them actually have changed their minds and let's say, left the stable of compliance and are now speaking up for Julian.
Mm.
But it's very, very important because this is, as I say, this is what he represents is real journalism, that you write things and you get it right, you get the facts right, and you get as much truth in there as you can. You can't get all the truth, but you get as much as you can. And you don't mind about upsetting authority. In fact, it's almost a holy mission that you should upset authority, because authority is not upset enough. That's why it's so smug.
You sound like a dangerous man, Mr. Pilger.
I